Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a non-traditional legal program with your host and trusted advisor, Liz Myska, your guide through the web of life's dilemmas.
Welcome to another edition of Connecting the Dots. I'm your host, Liz Myska. And today I would like to introduce my audience to an acquaintance, soon to be a friend, Colin Novick. Welcome, Colin.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be here with you.
I would love for you to tell my audience about what you do, what your day job is.
Sure. I play in the forest. How about that? I work for the Greater Worcester Land Trust, and we protect open space, and we create trails, we make habitat for wild and crazy critters, and we sort of give people a chance to go out and experience and have the fun of being in the second largest city in New England, but having all this forest and wildlife and brooks and streams and waterfalls and all that. So it's sort of a great chance to sort of take people's impression of what they think they know about Worcester and sort of shake it up and let them know that there's a whole lot more going on than they were previously watching.
How did you get involved in this?
Well, I love being outside, so it turns out you sort of fall into these things. I had worked for the Regional Environmental Council, and I was approached by some folks from the Greater Worcester Land Trust and said, "We think you might enjoy this. You should come hang out with us." And here I am 25 years later, still hanging out with them.
But now you're the head honcho, right?
One of them. It's an ensemble. So it's an ensemble. We have a board of directors that meets twice a month. And everybody's got their hands in it, and we've got volunteers who run the farm, and volunteers who work on trails, and volunteers who do carpentry and construction. So I am just one bit player who runs around between all these great volunteers who are the real strength and what make the whole thing work.
Wow. So you mentioned the farm. We're not talking about the funny farm, right?
No. We have the last farm in the city of Worcester, Donker Farm. It is grandfathered. We have 5 sheep. We have currently 5 geese. 25 chickens and 1 rooster.
Wow.
So
tell us.
Care for the flock, you know.
Okay.
I know my sheep, and my sheep know me.
Okay.
So yes, good fun. But it's neat because what we'll have is we have a trail that runs through this farm. So people will be walking along, and all of a sudden they'll look off to their left, and they're like, "That's a funny fence." And then they look through the fence and they see sheep wandering around. And if it's late enough in the afternoon, the sheep get bored, and you go through a trail style, which is sort of like a gate that swings behind you, so that you can come and go, but the sheep can't.
Okay.
So then you're out in their meadow, and you hike for a distance through the meadow, and if the sheep are bored, they'll actually follow you and hike along with you for a bit until you get to the other end of the meadow, and you go through another sheep style, and off you go into the woods. But it's kind of fun. So it's an opportunity for people to experience something that you might have in England or in Ireland, where you're sort of hiking through the meadows and you go through different people's pastures. But it's here in the city of Worcester.
Well, I spent some time when I was in college in England, and I'm Irish ancestry as well. And when you spoke about that, I could see like the little, it's almost like a little turnstile, and you would put your wellies on your boots, and you would. I'm trying to think of the terminology. They don't call it strolling or ambling, but there's a terminology, and again, people are out in nature, and it's just a part of being. It's not oh well, now we're going to schedule a walk someplace.
Yep.
So talk more about the land trust, and what other properties does the land trust own? Properties?
Sure. So it's sort of a mix. Our job is to make sure that the right thing happens at the end of the day. So sometimes that means that we own it. Sometimes it means that we sort of buy it and then hand it off to the city or to the state or to a town. Sometimes that means that we end up keeping the development rights so that it doesn't go away, but that doesn't mean that someone else can't own the land itself. It just means that it stays wild. So we have a mixture of things. We own some land, we own some development rights, and then we also flip land to other government agencies, because oftentimes we can move faster on a land deal than the government can. We have less bureaucracy and paperwork and approvals and committees to go through. We could just go out and snag it and hold on to it long enough for them to be able to pick it up on the other side. So it's kind of neat. It's a mix of different things, but our job is less about owning it and more about making sure that at the end of the day, there is enough wild open space in Worcester and the surrounding towns so that it's a place we want to live. It's a place that's healthy. It's a place that has clean water and clean air and places to sort of let your mind go and sort of relax when get out of the hustle and bustle of the universe.
So I think you're talking about stewardship as well. So you are making people aware, but you want them to be a part of it.
Yeah, we want, so there's a mixture of things. First of all, we love people just to go out and hike. Just go out for a walk, enjoy it. See a waterfall, walk along a brook, get a chance to see the birds. Every once in a while you get lucky and there's like moose that wanders around and you could be that millionaire. It's like the scratch ticket of Worcester Wildlife. Have you seen the bear or the moose? Some of us have. But the other part is all these things are maintained by volunteers. So in terms of opening trails or clearing them, or we just had the big ice storm and we've got branches that are down on things or trees that have come over, we'll get a group of people together as volunteers and we'll go out with bow saws and go clear the things up. This morning, right now as we're talking, there's a team at Southwick Pond of volunteers who are chopping their way through to make sure that the trail's back open again after the ice storm. That's cool stuff, but it's another way for the public to engage the open space. It's not just that it's out there, it's your open space. It's our common backyard. Go out and enjoy it. Have fun with it.
So you mentioned Southwick.
Southwick Pond.
Where is that?
So that is on the Leicester-Paxton line, just out of Worcester. So if you're going up Route 122 Pleasant Street out of Tatnick, there's a pond, actually two ponds with a walkway between them. And there's like mountain laurel, and there are, a mix of all sorts of trees. There's a hillside with blueberries. There's a hill that looks over the water. There are beavers that are currently there. There are otter that are in that water that sort of like to go sliding down slopes. It's sort of this great place where people go fishing or ice fishing in the winter time, but the trails are all in the forest. So it's just high enough out of the Worcester where when we have a storm, what could be rain here is an ice storm up there. So right now things are okay in the city, but up there we've got all sorts of trees down from the latest winter storm.
You're reminding me when you said mountain laurel, I also thought of lady slippers as
Yeah,
well during,
absolutely.
in my childhood, going out into the woods. I grew up in Holden, and behind our house, there were woods with a brook and stream, and that was our playground. We would go out, and there was, at one point in time, the land behind the forest had been cultivated, a farm. So there were wild raspberry bushes and wild blackberry bushes, and it was just an idyllic place to, on a hot summer day, you'd go out and you'd pick the raspberries. You'd be scratched, to smithereens, but it didn't matter because the delicacy of that fruit was just worthwhile, and it was a great pursuit. So thank you for bringing me back to.
Well, and the thing is that we want to make sure everybody has that common backyard.
Yes.
And if you're in a 3-decker or you're in a tower or you're in a small house in a dense neighborhood, you don't have those raspberries. You don't have those blueberries. You don't have the lady slippers. We, in common, hold this land to make sure everyone has this backyard. You want to go out there and do oil painting like, you're Bob Ross? Go for it.
How do you get people involved other than the volunteers? It sounds like the volunteers find you.
Yep.
And then they contribute their talents, whether that be, bushwhacking through the forest. But how do people find you?
So there are old school ways and new school ways. So the old school ways are, we'll put up a big sign. So we'll have a big timber-hewn sign in a frame where someone has hand-routed this big wood thing, and people will gravitate towards it and just discover it. They want to know, all right, what's going on here? There's clearly something going on. It looks like I'm in a national forest. Why is there this giant wooden sign here? And they'll start to wander up the trail, and that's sort of one way. The other way is, the internet, social media. So we're constantly posting things on Facebook and Instagram. Up until recently, we were doing Twitter, but got a little funny over there, so we're holding off for a sec. Nevertheless, social media is sort of a more modern way to help people engage. And it's also neat because not everyone has the freedom to be out in the woods all the time. Not everybody has the mobility to be out in the woods all the time. So having the mountain laurel right there in front of you, popping up on your screen, or whatever is happening right now in the woods. There's a misadventure with a chicken. You can live part of that story on social media. So that's sort of the newer way that we engage people.
Okay. How do you have events, you have activities?
Absolutely.
So do you plan a calendar?
Yes.
At the beginning of the year, and then you say, we're going to do this in February, we're going to do this in April, we're going to do this in June?
So we every month the board of directors has a hike. So that we'll have members of our board of directors who will lead a hike of one of our properties each month. Then we usually have the Green Friday or the day after Thanksgiving, when everyone sort of needs to work off a couple calories.
Okay.
We'll have one of those. We'll have a first day hike. We always have Earth Day cleanups in April, and then we have special things that pop up. So like we'll be protecting a new property, or we'll open a new trail, or there'll be something exciting that's happening somewhere. Like the mountain laurel is in bloom. Come on out and join us. So yes, there's sort of a regular set grid of things that are going on that we have a calendar. We actually publish a calendar with a volunteer who's taken beautiful professional photographs. But the calendar even has those dates baked into it. So you can sort of like see when the phase of the moon is and, it's the director hike. So all that stuff. We try to make sure there are a lot of ways for people to engage it.
What would you say is your favorite hike? Or do you have a favorite?
No, you can't do that. This is like a parent with children and grandchildren.
I know,
There's no picking favorites here. They each have their own distinct personality. You love that particular thing.
So where, if you had your dithers right now, where would you hike today, February 7th, 2023?
I would be curious to hike Asnabumskit because it is up on top of the ridge, which has Holden and Paxton, and it got hammered by the ice storm, and I would love to know what mischief is going on up there. There should be down branches and down trees. It should be like fighting through a tunnel to get through there. I would love to know what's going on up there. And it's just after a good storm. That would be a neat place to be. And it also is fairly remote terrain. You're not going to hear much for noise. So it's kind of nice to sort of get lost in the forest. And I don't mean like you can't find your way out, but just to sort of lose yourself, in your thoughts, just go for a walk.
So typically when you go for a hike, are you by yourself? Are you with a small group? Or what is your norm?
My norm is probably to be out there with a team of people. We probably have loppers and clippers and a bag for grabbing litter and bow saws, and we're sort of moving through as a small army and sort of marching our way along. And
I was going to say, with being industrious as you go, so you're
leaving it better than we found it.
Okay, all right. So Asnabumskit, you had mentioned before when we were speaking before we started taping about keeping the group together and incorporating not only the physical activity of walking, but storytelling or nature facts or whatever.
Worcester is full of stories to begin with. I mean, everything from Tory Fort Lane and chasing the British loyalists out of town. We have all sorts of great stories that way. But then also the forest itself has all sorts of neat things going on that if you know what to look for, you can tell. So we'll be walking along and, I'll ask people what do you see for trees and how many stems? And they'll say, they're big oak trees, but they're 2 stems and 3 stems. I'm like, this is a place that was logged. Oak trees never grow at 2 and 3. So you can start to unpack, we can tell what happened in the past by looking at the landscape. Get a chance for the listen to the woods. It has all sorts of stories between the stone walls and the vegetation and the streams. You can figure out what's happened here over hundreds of years just by watching. And it's kind of fun to be able to help people learn how to do that and be able to do it for themselves so that when they're out, they can appreciate the forest at a deeper level. It's not just like, hey, this is kind of cool, let's go run and burn off some calories, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that's going on in the forest if you know what to look for and what to read in the landscape.
To pick up on that point, I think younger people, and maybe again I'm being biased here, but when they hear hike, they think cardiovascular. I'm going out. I'm deriving the benefits of being outdoors, but they haven't been taught, quote unquote, what to look for, what to listen for. So do you find that when you have a grouping that includes younger people, that they need to be taught those those types of skills?
Maybe to some extent, but they also bring tools to the table that most of us wouldn't that are older. So like they'll have apps on their phone that help them understand the landscape in a way that even I can't. So like they can take a picture of a flower and look it up on iNaturalist and narrow it down within like 30 to 45 seconds and be able to tell me something about a rare subvariant of aster that I didn't even know anything about. Or they'll have the Cornell Bird Laboratory where they'll hold up their phone and it will like record the sound of birds and then it will tell them what the bird is. So, you know, yes, there are people who don't have experience, but I will also say the younger folk have tools that allow them to even dive deeper into the landscape than I can do on my own. So having a mix of people on the hike is great. So as much as I'll tell the stories on the hike, I always learn something on the hike. We'll have, you know, an older Polish grandmother who's picking out the mushrooms that won't kill us.
Right.
And meanwhile, we've got somebody who's got their app who's been hanging behind us and taking pictures of the purple flower and figuring out exactly what it is. And I'll end up learning things on the hike too. So next time we go out, I'll have more to share.
Typically, how long, distance-wise, are the hikes and time-wise?
Oh, I'm terrible to ask. I always say, it's about a mile. Take about an hour. It's always longer, and it always takes longer. And the other thing is that the more you start telling stories, the more everything sort of just drags out. So anyway, terrible to ask. That's why the board of directors are much more efficient at doing hikes once a month. The Colin hikes, they get all sorts of crazy.
So, in the recent past, what's been a Colin hike that's gone crazy?
Well, we were out walking a new piece of land in Holden that goes by a couple different names. Blueberry Hill is one of the names for it, which drives me nuts because there are no blueberries on it.
Right.
Maybe you could call it Huckleberry Hill, a different kind of berry that's sort of like a blueberry. It also is called Malden Hill by the United States Geological Survey. Nevertheless, we're out there and we're talking about rocks. We're looking for the right-hand turn. We're looking at the brooks. We're talking about, you know, the landscape was used as a quarry, and it's supposed to be a short hike. And we came back and a little more time passed than I had originally thought might have passed. But nevertheless, everyone was in good spirits, and we didn't lose anyone on the hike, so it was all good.
Was this off of Route 31?
It is actually up off of I-190. So you can hear the sound of traffic going by.
Okay.
So Malden Street is a bridge that goes over 190,
Yeah.
and there's this pocket of open space that's there that's fairly new with a brand new trail loop. And it's also fun because you sort of think about the landscape is always changing. So right now you can hear the traffic. And you start to think about like all these electric vehicles that are being produced. Now we're all switching to electric vehicles, and you're thinking, you know, in 10, 20 years, it may be really quiet out here, even though it's next to the highway.
Right.
How crazy is that? Right. So, you know, you're thinking about the past, but you also, it invites you to dream about what the future might be too. You know, everything from climate change to the way we do things keeps shifting. And you think, how does that change the landscape?
Right. Is this near the Holden property? Is this near the rail trail in?
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay.
No, it's near the Quinnapoxet Reservoir. It's near the Holy Cross Retreat Center. It's on the Holden West Boylston line where Malden Street and 190 cross. It's sort of a funny little pocket of town.
You're making me think about the East-West Trail here in Worcester. Well, I have a story about hiking that, but I'll defer for the moment. Again, was the vision to have a continuous trail, or did it just happen?
Well, the East-West Trail was about hopscotching from park to park. It's sort of like playing a game of hopscotch where you're jumping square to square, and you can make the connection from Lake Quinsigamond on one side all the way over to the airport and Boynton Park and the Cascades in the west. So you're going through neighborhoods. And you're going, you know, you're seeing historic structures. You go through a historic district. You see Bancroft Tower, and you also go through woods. But it's sort of a mix. You're going through parks as you go. It's a different kind of experience. Mm-hmm. But the cool part about that is if you see the blue mark, if you're a kid growing up in Worcester, you see this blue mark on a light post. You know that if you turn left, you're going to be in a park, and if you turn right, you're going to be in a park. And it doesn't really matter which direction you go in. And it starts to make you think about your city in a different way. Mm-hmm. anywhere you turn, you can end up in a park. So it sort of invites you to think about the city in a very different way. That's different than some of the hikes that I tend to go on, which is continuous in the woods all the way. But there aren't enough woods to get across the whole city that way. So hopscotch is how you get east to west. But the other trails are sort of how you can explore Broadmeadow Brook or up in the Cascades or over by Bavensey Park. There are other places that are big landscapes. But for a lot of the city, it's parks. And it's sort of hopping from park to park and getting to explore them. I mean, how many people have gone out to explore the local parks?
I have.
There you go. Bravo, bravo.
Well, I'm thinking in terms of accessibility as well, because there's going to be an element of the population that is not going to be physically able to access the woods.
Absolutely. And Worcester has been getting a lot better on that. So in the old days, what you would tell someone is, well, if you go to Haven Park, there's an abandoned chunk of street called Knox Street, and it'll allow you to walk through this wonderful forested park. And it's flat, and it's smooth, and it's stable, and that's a good surface. But that was about it. Nowadays, we've got a lot better. We've got the boardwalk, which is over on the Middle River. We've got the boardwalk, which is over by Coes. We've got a boardwalk, which is over in Hadwin. They've been doing a lot better job at making paths in Green Hill Park that are sort of accessible. So back in the day, it was sort of, oh, there's a leftover street. Now, there's like a growing inventory of surfaces that anybody can go on, like, you know, mothers with kids in a stroller or someone with a walker, doesn't really matter. It's a good, solid, stable footing that you can manage to work. And you can tell, like Coes Reservoir, that boardwalk is used all the time, every day. And it's just gorgeous views, totally flat. Anybody can do it, you know, no cardiovascular stress. Just amble along and check out the Canada geese. It's all good.
Well, you're also reminding me, because that was where I encountered you most recently at the ribbon cutting for the boardwalk at Coast Pond. And I've been bringing groups of differently abled people and different aged people over to Coast Pond and the accessible playground. And again, people have this notion of, when I say playground, they're like, oh, that's for kids. Or I say, we're going to hike. Oh, that's for able-bodied people. The tricky thing, and I want to hear your opinion on this, is how do you entice someone and say, well, just come once and see for yourself, if I can use that terminology, being a visually impaired person, come test it out, as opposed to listening to Colin, wax poetic about it, or Liz wax poetic about it. I find that and I'm not letting you talk, I'm more successful when I entice, not lure or coax people. Then they come, and then they're like, wow, I didn't know that this existed. I didn't know that this was here. I'm in nature, and I didn't think, and this is Worcester, I didn't think this was possible. Get your comment about that.
Yeah, I mean, part of the trick is being from a very tiny nonprofit, there are limits as to what we can do in terms of outreach. So in many cases, this is sort of like Field of Dreams, where build it and they will come. Mm-hmm. We will partner with the city and sort of make sure that we help do the engineering design work for the Middle River Park. But ultimately, it's the city who ends up building it. And it's ultimately the city and the National Park Service who end up leading the hikes and advertising it. I mean, in many ways, each of our nonprofits take a different part of the pie. Mass Audubon does a really good job at inviting people to places for the first time and providing that kind of that first experience in a way that we don't have the capacity for. We each sort of bring different tools. Part of what the Land Trust does is we try to create the canvas. We try to make sure that there's enough left, open space that we can work with and sort of create openings, create a parking area, create a gate to get in. But then we have other partners who can help lead hikes and sort of bring people in, or the city can work on a grant that sort of puts in benches and bike racks and stuff like that to make it all the more welcoming and familiar to folk. We each are part of a team, so I will be honest, we don't specialize in that part of it. We do the hikes partly to help people understand who we are as an organization and to to potentially join up and be members and support the work that we're doing to make sure that there's more of a canvas for the future generations. But I would say that in terms of that first experience going out, a lot of times it's more like Mass Audubon who really champions that role in the city, and they deserve credit for that.
And so you mentioned a couple partners, that Mass
Audubon, City of Worcester is a huge partner. I mean, the reservoirs are a partner, the Concom, the Parks Department, City Manager's Office. There's a whole constellation of partners in the city side. But then Park Spirit, who were people who were behind the East-West Trail. And then there are individual family neighborhood groups that, Columbus Park Neighborhood Group, all sorts of folks who are really helping us out. We are just one of a bunch. Regional Environmental Council, with their Earth Day cleanups and their helping people grow stuff in the city. Again, I'm going to miss people. There's the Urban Tree Initiative. There's this whole big group of nonprofits that all partner and work well together. Our job really is to make sure that there's land to work with, and a bunch of them go further with it after that.
So it's like a web. It's almost like like a spider web, not the internet, not the internet. Do you have anything coming up within the next couple months that you want to tell people? Okay.
April's a big deal. We have Earth Day, we have Arbor Day, we are likely to have a Wild and Scenic Film Festival, we'll be having hikes. April is sort of when the earth is waking back up, everything's turning green, it's finally warm, everybody wants to go outside. It's when people are like, I should chip in, I should do a volunteer event. April will be a big event. It'll be chock full of activity. The Regional Environmental Council is doing stuff. Mass Audubon's doing stuff. Urban Tree Initiative is doing stuff. Greater Worcester Land Trust will be all over doing exciting stuff. Find us on social media. We're there. Call us up at the office. We'd be happy to chat. But April will be a big, big month.
Can you give the number to call?
508-795-3838. That's 508-795-3838. Call now and you too could be a member.
Well, that was a nice plug. One final thing. I believe you're doing an event at, or you're a vendor, so to speak, at Worcester State on February 16th. Is that an opportunity for people to...
That's the wellness fair.
Yes.
Absolutely. So we were trying to encourage people to think of the experience of being in outdoors and being in open space as a mental health wellness exercise. Yes. And that's what we're going to be doing, and that's what we'll be highlighting at that event. Okay.
Well, I'm planning on being there, so...
we'll see you there.
We'll see you there. Thank you so much, Colin, for your vigor, your enthusiasm, and hopefully we can partner as well.
Sounds great. It's been a pleasure, and we'll be out in the woods together. It'll be good.
Okay. Join us for another edition of Connecting the Dots next time.
Please note that the information provided in this show is not a substitute for consulting with an experienced local attorney and receiving counsel based on the facts and circumstances of a particular transaction. To contact Lizbeth, email her at lizbeth@elizabethlmyska.com or call her office at 508-753-7681. We're online at connectingthedots.lawyer. Executive producers, Liz Myska and Jack Peacock. Producers, John Medberry and Bill Hamilton. A production of Elizabeth L. Myska, JD, LLM, in association with Compliments.